Okay, man, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. Now, come on, now crank this motherfucker up.
Break it down like this.
Hello Internet, Gino that Pinguino Greco here again with another episode of Deep Listens. And today it's time to take a walk, to go around outside, and to play the Pedestrian, a game about a tiny person running on street signs. Something I've often thought about when I was in a car and very bored. So now that experience has been turned into a game, and joining me to talk about this game is Pete Busby. Hello, Pete.
Hey, what's going on? This was my pick, and I stand behind it. I think it's a pretty solid one. Fun fact for this week, so a man recently broke a very dumb but very difficult Guinness World Record for stacking M&Ms. As far as I can tell, the new record is 5 M&Ms stacked up. Yeah, not that high, but pretty impressive because they're very hard to stack. But that made me think of other Guinness records, and I found one that I like, amongst many good ones. This is about largest bird's nest. I'll just read it. The largest bird's nest was built by a pair of bald eagles and possibly their successors. So this was a dynastic bird nest.
Awesome.
Near Petersburg, Florida. It measured 9 feet 6 inches wide and 20 feet deep and was estimated to weigh more than 4,000 pounds.
My goodness.
So two eagles built a 4,000-pound nest. Preposterous. Well, and their successors, depending.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, that nest, it belongs to no one. It belongs to the people.
Yeah, it's basically an eagle palace at that point.
Yeah, that throne has always been and always will be. There's just a different eagle sitting on it every couple of months. That's amazing. Though, honestly, your first fun fact about the stacking of M&Ms makes me think the challenge there is probably finding the M&Ms, right? Like 5 of the flattest M&Ms you've ever seen.
Well, that was my question, right? Is if there's smushing that like the Guinness people are investigating. So we did a video of the whole thing, and it looked pretty legit and also very difficult. There's also records for stacking bowling balls.
What?
Which actually gets pretty high.
Huh.
Yeah, let's see if I can track that one down quick.
Are the bowling balls all the same weight, or are you allowed to go like heaviest on the bottom?
I think they're all. The most bowling balls stacked vertically is 10 and was achieved by Shen Zhaoxi, I'm going to take a guess, on the set of CCTV Guinness World Record Special in Beijing, China in January 2016. It took him over 2 hours to complete the stack of 10 balls, which then collapsed when he attempted to add an 11th. So 10 bowling balls stacked vertically is the record.
Unfortunately, he was crushed to death by the bowling balls. So there will be no subsequent attempt.
He died how he lived.
Stacking bowling balls. And also we are joined, as always, by the mistress of games, M. Palladino. Hello, M.
Hello. Thank you for letting me play a game where I play as a little guy, because those are my favorite types of games. Just a little dude doing his thing. This is what that game's about.
Very much so. For its entire duration.
Yeah. There is no twist ending.
Not at all.
Or is there?
Well, I'll never tell. Except, if you get to the end of the podcast, at which point I will tell.
Yeah, we'll very much tell.
Yeah. So before we get to the Pedestrian, as always, you can get in touch with the show at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have our comment sections, and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. You can also support the show on patreon.com/deeplistens, at which point you will get access to our Discord, a variety of community events, of which we are soliciting requests and feedback. So if you go to our email or any of that and say what sorts of things you'd want from the Patreon, you can always send us a message, even if you do not support the show. But even $1 will get you access to the Discord, access to talking to the hosts, suggesting things. I will say we are sometimes persuaded to play games from suggestions on the Discord. But beyond that, we also have the Discord report, which you can be on if you support the show. Discord report.
The Discord report. This week on the Discord report. I don't know what we're talking about on Discord right now. Let me check.
Well, the NBA playoffs continue. Pete, sorry to your Philadelphia 76ers.
Yeah, we're pretty well fucked now.
What happened?
So like our second best player has been completely broken mentally and emotionally.
Jeez.
So in basketball, it's really useful if you can score from far away from the hoop, right? Like you want to be able to score from close and from far away. The 76ers' second best player can only score from about 2 feet and in. And that's a problem because he is their point guard and has the ball almost all the time. And so he also shoots free throws at about a 30% clip.
Yeah. The reigning theory right now is that he's shooting with the wrong hand. So he's a natural righty, but he's shooting left-handed.
Why?
Because supposedly his dad trained him to do that as a kid.
Yeah.
And he's just kept doing it ever since.
We trained him wrong on purpose as a joke.
He's ambidextrous is the thing. But it turns out maybe he's not as ambidextrous as he thought. But the wildest part of this is he does literally everything else with his right hand except shoot a basketball.
Actually, too, the majority of his shots he takes with his right hand. Like, it's only when he's shooting jumpers that he shoots left-handed.
Really?
Huh.
Yeah, so like floaters, dunks, layups, predominantly right-handed.
Come on.
Mm-hmm.
He's been in the NBA for what, 4 years now? 5?
Yeah, 4 years, I think.
Ugh. So yeah, it was a real problem for them that their second best player, who has the ball a lot of the time, was very scared of being fouled and refused to shoot. He shot 3 shots across 7 games in the fourth quarter.
I can imagine how that might be a problem in a game where you want to shoot basketballs a lot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Astute, M. You're on it.
Yeah. There was a play where he is 6'10", I believe. And he had someone who is generously 6 feet tall, maybe 160 pounds or 170 pounds between him and the hoop. And instead of dunking it, he passed it to another guy who was then fouled. And that man was farther away from the hoop than he was. It was bad.
As I said, completely broken mentally and emotionally. I feel bad for the guy. I do. But it's time to move him like it was time to move Markelle Fultz.
Yeah, he is not playing for the Australian national team because he needs to work on himself. Basically is what he said. I need to spend the summer working on individual skills development.
Yeah, he does.
You've been a professional basketball player for 4 years. You should have been doing that the whole time. Other things going on the Discord. We've got upcoming Dad of Light discussion. That's going to be coming soon. So we've been getting ready for doing that.
That'll be a cute one.
Yep, that'll be a cute one. I've discussed Floppy Nights. That's a game that's coming out soon. The beta just came out, so stream some of that. We also got into some discussion of the new Magic the Gathering set that is based on Dungeons & Dragons.
You have some strong opinions on this?
I do. I don't like Dungeons & Dragons aesthetic. I like Dungeons & Dragons as a system for telling stories, but like the parts of Dungeons & Dragons where someone came up with a name for a thing, or like they came up with a canonical character name, those I tend to roll my eyes at, and those are the only things that they've ported over to the card game.
With Dungeons and Dragons, the whole thing is you can do anything you want, and them focusing on the one canonical story is probably doing a disservice. But a lot of people were unhappy that they were doing a cross-pollination thing. D&D got a bunch of different supplements where it was like Ravnica and Theros and
magic stuff.
Yeah, magic stuff. The D&D people were like, you're just repackaging your lore books from Magic. And the Magic people now are like, this is just, I mean, it's Magic. It's a world where you can do whatever because it's a multiverse. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, so Pete, I was in the Discord. People said that I was being a gatekeeper and turning my nose up at saying some of these names are dumb.
Mm-hmm.
I want your opinion.
Right.
These are character names that are now going to be in this game that I've played for 20 years.
Well, I feel like that's not the right definition of gatekeeper to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not keeping anyone out.
Yeah, so I figure. But I would love to weigh in on the relative dumbness of these names.
Please weigh in on the relative dumbness of these names. First name. This, I feel, is the most reasonable of the names that I have seen. Nadar selfless paladin. And it's important to say Nadar is spelled Nadaar.
I mean, okay. Like we're starting off okay. I can accept that one.
Yeah, that's a relatively okay.
Yeah, that's low stakes.
Loloth, Spider Queen.
Lolth.
Lolth, Spider Queen.
Spelled Lolth, which lol. She's actually a planeswalker, which is a terrifying thought.
A Spider Queen.
Lolth, who is the spider goddess. If she's a planeswalker, that's fucked up.
They said that some of the planeswalker cards are just because they are big important characters. They are not going to canonically be planeswalkers.
Oh, good, because holy shit.
Yeah, that sounds bad. Though they just printed a giant mass of bugs that is a planeswalker, and that is in Modern Horizons. That's a real card. Just
like a mass of bugs, like a pile of bugs?
A pile of bugs. So this pile of bugs is a bug when it's not in play. If it's anywhere but in play, it's a bug. And then when it's in play, it's this horrifying mound of bugs.
Gross.
Yep. So Lolth, pretty normal name. Now we're starting to get to the iffy ones. Drizzt Do'Urden.
Is that all one name? Or like first name Drizzt, last name Do'Urden?
Yeah, first name Drizzt, spelled Drizzt, and then last name DO'Urden.
That's dumb. That's a dumb name.
Drizzt is Trist. He's the guy who all the books are following. I don't know if it's all the books, but
that's the name they picked for their main protagonist. So like I have to read that name on like most pages.
So many times, yes.
That's horrible. That was a terrible decision.
Well, maybe I should tell you more about his friend Bruenor Battlehammer.
I mean, that's a great last name. I wish my last name was Battlehammer.
Why don't you tell me what race he is?
Human, I guess. What
Dwarf.
are the races? Dwarf, shit.
Dwarf.
That's a much better guess.
And now the last name that I will read, because it's the last one I know. Eliwick Tumblestrum.
Bard would be my guess here?
Yes, Eliwick is a bard.
Halfling bard.
Nice.
I assumed that she was an elf because pointy ears.
Nah, that's a halfling name. Always very silly. This is canonical lore. If you look in the player's handbook, there's all of these.
I won't, and you can't make me.
Someday, it's coming for you, Gino. One of these days, we're going to play D&D as a podcast game.
Fine, one day, but that day's not today. And Pete, you have my back here. Some of these names are silly.
They're all very silly, yes.
That's not to say that Magic doesn't have silly names in it. There's Dakon Blackblade. That's not a great name either. But, you know, I said this in the Discord, I've spent more time absorbing parody episodes of TV shows where they play D&D than playing D&D. So all of this stuff, I've seen it made fun of more than actually experienced it at all. So I've been primed to roll my eyes at some of this.
It's amazing that we got through our tenure at a game shop without you playing D&D once.
Look, I overheard D&D happening occasionally. I remember during Extra Life, I was speedrunning a Final Fantasy of some kind, and some people were just playing D&D for 10 hours.
Yes.
The person who was near me who was DMing was, I would describe them as a sadist. And I remember someone opened up a treasure chest, and then he was like, it was full of acid and your hands are burnt off.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And I was like,
that seems rude. This is what you get for your avarice.
That seems rude.
You have learned a lesson here. They didn't learn a lesson.
They didn't. So it's now time for my obsession of the week. I have a quick obsession. It should be very fast. I've been watching Angel again, the spin-off show of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Oh, sure. No.
Season 4 of Angel is trash. Try not to watch much of it. It's very bad. They take all the characters you like. They make them less central. They introduce characters you hate. And they do one of the main characters very wrong and write them off the show. I got past season 4 because there was a promise that was made to me that at some point there would be a puppet episode.
Like where all the characters are like claymation but with puppets?
No, Angel, the titular character, the vampire with a soul, is turned into a Muppet by dark magics.
But just him?
Just him.
Okay.
he investigates a children's TV show that is draining the souls of children.
Does he fix it at the end, or do they just leave him as a puppet for the rest of the show? Because this will determine if I am interested in watching Angel ever.
It goes away. However, at the end of the episode, he's got a potential romantic interest, and he gets turned into a puppet after he learns that he's being an idiot and is not seeing her advances. And so he's turned into a puppet, and then he hides under his desk because he doesn't want her to see that he's a puppet. He eventually goes, "Look, I was hiding that I've been turned into a puppet, but, we should go get coffee or something." And at the end of the episode, they walk hand in hand, his puppet hand and her human hand.
Okay, that's really good.
Where is that headed?
I don't know. She's a werewolf.
What if this date works out?
And she's into the puppet thing?
Is he an anatomically correct puppet?
Unclear.
That goes into my next question. Is there a hand up his ass?
No. They have some full shots of him.
Soon.
They have some full shots of him, and you can see his little feet. He's got little feet.
Little puppet feet.
He's got little puppet feet.
Kermit feet.
So he retains all of his vampire powers when he's a puppet, so he's still super strong, but he's a puppet.
So there's no downside to him being a puppet then.
Well, other than being a puppet, he's not super tough. He can't regenerate when he's a puppet. He needs people to sew him back together, and that comes up. He gets puppet scars. You should watch the puppet episode.
This should just be a show in itself.
Yes.
I think it would be worlds better if we just had a puppet vampire slayer.
I don't even need a show. I just want a 300-page book unpacking all the things that are going on with this puppet in his life.
We could do that too.
I'm going to post a picture of this in the chat.
I'll put that on my list.
I'm going to put this in the chat.
If you're on the Discord, you've already seen this picture.
So this is episode Smile Time, and it is season 5, episode 14. It's the best episode of Angel as far as I can tell, and if Angel never gets better than this, I'm okay with that. All right, so without further ado, let's get into the...
Nope.
What,
I just saw it. Nope.
You don't like it?
I'm gone. Super creepy.
I love that he's got a scowl as a puppet. It's so good. David Boreanaz, everyone. What a versatile actor. He's had the same hair for 20 years. All right, so without further ado, let's discuss the Pedestrian, the game about crossing streets as a crossing sign. So, Pete, since you picked the game, why don't you set us up? What's the Pedestrian?
Yeah, honestly, pretty much the whole thing's captured in the premise. You control the little figure. You can pick a man or a woman, a figure to control, and you just sort of navigate these signs. And as you jump from sign to sign, you move around like a real world environment. So basically these signs are spread across like a factory and a cityscape. I'm still looking at this stupid puppet. As you move throughout these puzzles and solve them, you also move through the city going to where you're going, basically.
Yeah. So this is a hardcore puzzle game. I would describe it, of the games we've played, it is probably the closest to Unravel or Brothers. Unravel, I think, is the closest, for sure.
Yeah, you're probably right. That was the yarn one, right?
Yeah, with the yarnies.
Yeah, I picked that one too.
Tiny little character walking around a big world solving puzzles with a limited tool set. That's kind of ever expanding mechanics, but your tool set stays the same. So the Pedestrian, this is a fairly straightforward puzzle game. It doles out, new mechanics here and there. How did you feel about the aesthetic choice, walking around on signs? Because I feel like that's what really differentiates it at first glance, that it's made this kind of little person in a big world kind of moving around in the background of this big world. So, and what did you think of kind of the aesthetic?
It puts a lot of work into the background, which is staggeringly detailed for something that is only in the background. There are cars moving around on the streets, which is fascinating to just watch. Considering you are only ever playing on a 2D environment, my cat has stolen a piece of bacon off of my plate and is eating it in front of me like a bastard.
What a dick.
Owned. Who's the cat now?
I might cut that part out, but I might not.
Leave it in.
Anyway, sometimes you are interacting with stuff in the real world,
doors or gates and things
Doors,
like
gates, we're moving stuff around.
Elevators.
Yeah, elevators, trains. Sometimes you go into a train and then there's a little puzzle you do to decide where you're going. It's neat. If you are interested in playing as a little guy, doing little guy things and affecting the bigger world, that's one of those games. It also feels very Portal at times. Seems like one of their influences. If you remember, Portal had those like similar signs that depicted just a little stick figure doing a thing. And it seems like they were like, what if we actually just made that our entire game? And also you have to sometimes do that like mind-bending, think with portals, solving puzzles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that this game also has a lot of just very hermetic puzzle design. You know, you get to an area and it's just like, here's 7 signs that you need to reorganize and, you know, link together so that you can advance, you know, and it's just a thinker.
Yeah, and also it's in terms of the aesthetic too, it fits in sort of the long tradition of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids or like A Bug's Life or like things that shift scale to ask you to examine things that are previously overlooked. You know what I mean? Like A Bug's Life might make you think like, ooh, what's going on in like this grass beneath my feet? It's a whole world of its own. This is trying to do basically the same thing with street signs, where it's like, what's really going on in these street signs? It's a whole universe open to all of us. It's almost like a mindfulness exercise. Like pay attention to all the things around you and what multitudes they might contain.
Yes. Like I said kind of at the top, and by picking this specific aesthetic, I know that I have, like, when I'm sitting in a car, or when I was younger sitting in a car, like how many games are designed around you're stuck in a car and you need to find a way to occupy your time? And by that I mean like the actual physical games. Like there's Punch Buggy.
Yeah, I Spy.
I Spy. I was with some friends who played, I think, Kill Cow, Marry Cow. There was some sort of cow game where you had to count the number of cows that you could see, and then anytime you saw a church, you could say Marry Cow, and that doubled the number of cows that you controlled during the ride.
You lose your cows at graveyards.
Yes, and you lose your cows at graveyards. See, these are the designs.
I've never heard of this.
It's a Midwestern thing, because there are cows there.
Probably. That makes sense. I don't get out much from New York.
Yeah, us New Yorkers, I was like, where do you see these cows? And they were like, everywhere. And I was like,
just
nah.
Look around.
You can't not see them.
Yeah. So, like, I think that it's a very natural thing to do, you know. I think a lot of kids have thought of games or played games like this, or at least set in a similar locale, because it's all from the perspective of being in a car. But this, I think, takes it more to the street, to walking around, to kind of creating a game out of your surroundings, which I think is pretty cool. So the game itself, the primary way you interact with the world is via these street signs. Your character can only be on one street sign at a time, but the street signs can be connected to each other via doors or ladders, or eventually you get some other more advanced ways to connect the signs together. But every door that you connect, you might have kind of a left side door on one side, that can only connect to a right side door. And once a connection has been made between 2 doors, and once you have walked through that door, it cannot be broken without resetting your progress. The same is true of ladders. So the trick is kind of lining up, okay, what door do I need to go through so that I can position everything properly so that I clear this entire route between multiple signs without breaking those alignment rules. And there's also some alignment rules on, like, the doors have to be kind of adjacent to each other. So if one sign's above the other, you can't use left door, right door, because one's above the other. Same thing's true with ladders. If 2 signs are next to each other, you have to move them so one's on top of the other so that the ladder works. So there's, you know, positioning. There's eventually stuff like electricity that you can use to power certain doors. And so those are kind of the logic puzzles. What did y'all think of kind of the expanding set of puzzles that the game throws at you and rules?
So I found myself most interested in sort of the layers of geography at work. So you have, basically there are like 2 2D structures and then 1 3D structure. So you need to be concerned with the environment on the individual signs you're controlling, right? You know, how do I navigate this particular sign? Then Gino, as you said, you then have to connect up signs. Like, okay, how do I link these multiple spaces to, you know, bring the elements I need in? But then eventually you get a 3rd structure where you need to keep track of where signs dispersed around the city are. and sort of, okay, if I go through this left-hand door, what adjacent area will it take me to, and what do I have to do there and bring it back here? So you really need to keep track of all 3 layers at once by the time you get to some of the more complex puzzles.
Yeah, and this game, I don't know, you might have felt the same way, or Pete, you might have felt the same way. At a certain point, the amount of layered rules, at first it starts out as kind of a platformer, then there's some light puzzles, and then it gets denser and denser. You're dealing with 4 or 5 mechanics at once instead of just a single one. And once that happened, I felt like this game was more work than fun.
Yeah.
Keeping track of all the mechanics and keeping track of where everything went, I started feeling more overwhelmed because a lot of the puzzles in this game are not just one-offs. You'll kind of eventually reach hubs where you kind of have to acquire an item, and those hubs tend to involve 4 or 5 puzzles to acquire the item you need. And so I would just get to one of those rooms and be like, oh no, I need to do a lot of puzzles right here. I don't know if I'm up for 6 puzzle rooms in a row.
Yeah, the mechanics are very cute when they're one-offs. Like sometimes you connect a electrical current to another one via a wire, which, that's fine. And then when you have to do like 6 or 7 of those in order to progress, that's where it got a little bit much. There's usually always a key that you need to find. Sometimes there are blocks that you need to push into the right spot. Everything, when it's taken all together, it got to be a little much. Around the point where you're in like the park, there's like one hub that has like 6 different doors, and that's probably the longest puzzle of the game, unless I'm forgetting something later on.
Maybe the last puzzle if you don't understand what's up.
Yeah, the last puzzle we'll have to discuss in itself, but yeah, individually each puzzle was fine, and then once it got to be like, okay, now you're going to be coalescing a set of items in one central location, that's where I was like, do I have to?
I'm not sure the rules of the world make sense either. So like you're supposed to be controlling this guy who's basically just iconography on a sign, and yet when he strings wires between nodes on that sign, it also carries current.
Yeah,
like
there's
these wires
something
shouldn't exist.
There's something going on with like the meta narrative of sometimes there are wires connected to metal signs, which is an interesting choice.
Look, you just need to electrocute these people until they understand not to cross.
Yeah, like I will say some of the objectives are telegraphed with sticky notes that are posted nearby. So I never felt like, confused as to what I needed, because if I looked around, eventually I would find like, oh, this one requires a key, which who knows who's doing that. I guess spoilers, it might be someone close to the little guy, which I don't know. There's very little story in this game.
Everything is implied or inferred.
Yeah, you just kind of have to piece it together as you're going. So, do we want to talk about the little Game Boy?
Yeah, so like the central driver is that there's a Game Boy, a non-copyrightable mobile game device, non-copyright infringing mobile game device that you have to kind of assemble parts for as you move throughout the game. So those hubs that I talked about where you're getting 3 or 4 puzzles kind of in a row, those will usually result in you getting access to some new piece that the game child requires. And once you've assembled all the pieces, that's kind of your driver, is getting new parts for the game child. So Pete, what did you think of that kind of like thin driver?
So the game, I mean, it's hard to like discuss my critique without necessarily jumping to the ending. But I feel like the game is trying to create a lot of stuff that it doesn't necessarily earn. So again, like I feel like things would have been better and simpler if you were just this man moving across these street signs, and like maybe you need to get to your, sign maiden who's like trapped on the other side of the city or something. Like that's a very sort of dumb cliche plot. But like this is a game that I think is well served by a dumb cliche plot instead of this like weird meta narrative of escape it's trying to create.
Yeah, if they had made an entire, like a Lego movie-esque little world on these signs, I think I would have liked that more. So what they eventually, and spoilers for the end of the Pedestrian, a 3.5-hour puzzle game, but when you assemble all of the pieces of the game child, you then can leave the signs, basically. Like your little person can go into the game child and be carried around by a human who can move in the world, like a normal action game.
Yeah.
First person.
I struggle to understand the relationship between this dude and Sign Man. So like it seems like the human programmed Sign Man. Is that what's going on here?
Yeah,
Maybe?
like when you get to the apartment, there's a floppy disk where he's like testing out some new sign program, but we don't know why he's doing this.
Or how it works, or like what's going on. Like it gestures at a larger narrative. I don't feel like I fully got it. I thought once it pulled out, and I think it's clever that eventually they let you move around the world because, like we said, there's so much detail to it when it was just signs, and that kind of lets them do some puzzles where maybe the signs relate to the real world space you're in. Stuff like that. So that's kind of interesting. But I think ultimately coming to this apartment of a person you don't know with some, well-designed apartment, but that's just, the last 2% of the game. And so it barely relates to anything that happens before it. And they don't try to give connective tissue between these two bits. The part where you're platforming as a tiny person on a sign, and the part where you're controlling what is ostensibly a human. I mean, you just see a hand, but the conclusion where you just get on a boat and boat away, I don't know why that was the conclusion. Like, I don't know why anything.
So the closest I can come is like you get on the boat and there's like a long cable, basically, like extending from that's the bow is the front of the boat, right? Mm-hmm. Extending from the bow, and you trace this.
Actually, I think that's the poop deck.
We're not really boat people here, as you can tell. Extending from the front of the boat, and then you like follow this cable forward. And the only thing I can understand is like, okay, it's similar to the connections between these two signs. So maybe you're leaving your sign to go to a different sign in the same way the little guy, runs across his. But that's a very sort of like tenuous metaphor to connect. And then it creates these questions like, oh, okay, like in order for the man to escape, why did he need to create Sign Man to also escape? Like there's just a lot of things that aren't working out. And they become even more complicated by like the skyscraper levels. You remember those?
Yeah, we should talk about that one. The skyscraper is 4 skyscrapers connected by a bunch of walkways, and then in one of them there is a puzzle using signs which mirrors the real world. Mm-hmm. And when you move boxes in the real world, it moves stuff in the sign world, and that's what you do in order to get a key, which will open the door that you need to get to the apartment, which is odd.
Yeah, it works for me as a puzzle design, as a narrative element. I don't know what to make of it.
Mm-hmm.
No, it seems like they came up with something like, oh, like this is a nice little cool twist without understanding, okay, how does that affect the rules of your world?
Yeah, feels like, this game felt to me a little bit like The Witness, if you remember that game we played many a year ago at this point, where like the whole world is a puzzle. There's a bunch of line puzzles,
yes.
But the whole world is a puzzle, remember?
I do. I remember hating it.
Yes. So it reminded me a little bit of that, except The Witness was very interested in its own internal consistency of its rules.
Yes, very well thought out.
This game was much more about like, look, we have some neat mechanics. We're going to dole them out in a normal linear fashion. And we've got this twist. We think it's cool. There may or may not be some sort of narrative weight to it, but we think it's a cool moment, so we'll do it.
Yeah, I mean, like in the abstract, all these pieces are kind of cool, right? Like if you had said if it was just been like a Lego scenario where it's like, all right, we're just sticking to the signs, like the signs are their own world, we're having that. Or like if you had this other narrative where like just the moment of a guy getting into a boat and just like sort of drifting off on this cable into the unknown. Again, a cool moment, but not together. This is a game that's less than the sum of its parts, at least story-wise.
I guess the question is, what would the ending be for a game like this if it didn't go to like the weird, whatever is beyond the boat scenario?
So it reminds me of something Vonnegut said about stories one time. Vonnegut said a lot about stories a lot of the time. One thing he said is that whenever you have a story, every person needs to want something, whether it's like a glass of water or to, start the French Revolution. Each character should want a thing. And I think in this case, they never give Sign Guy something to want. It's like you're forced to like export all of his motivations onto this human that's seemingly controlling things from the background. If they had given Sign Guy something to want, it could have even been a MacGuffin. Like I said, it could have just been, your princess is in a different castle. Then, the ending is him getting it.
Yeah, I mean, what if sign person at the end of running on the signs, it turns out that all the sign people are from a tiny sign society, and you're free. You're free into the sign society.
He finds the one sign village, and he lives there for the rest of his days.
With all
Sure,
the other
I would
sign people.
that. Yeah.
There we go. I'm a writer.
Is he, it doesn't have to be, like I said, it's a 3.5 hour puzzle game. It doesn't have to be I appreciate comments on the human condition, but this could have just been a comment on the sign condition.
Yeah, and I think that speaking of a game we've played that was similar mechanically, Unravel has a bit of a story to it, but the way that they dole it out is that your yarnies, the little yarn characters in the foreground, are interacting with a story that is unfolding in the background that is fairly linear and intelligible. And it's not like we played Unravel 1 or 2, I forget.
We played
2.
2.
2.
Yes.
Yeah. So
You skipped ahead.
the story in 2 is this kid's running away from home, and then there are just bad things are happening to these children. They may or may not be starting a revolution of some kind, but all of it's kind of implied and in the background, but it's a linear story that's intelligible. Here, they are trying to do a lot more with a lot less, and then at the end, they get much more highfalutin. Or it's implied, I think, that some more highfalutin stuff's going on, and I just couldn't follow it because it was too little too late.
No, I pretty much checked out once he jumped onto the Game Boy and you saw the human hand carrying him around. Because again, it makes no sense within the context of the universe.
Yeah, at least not until that point. And, maybe if you read the signs or something, there's more to it, but that's not really what the game felt like it was about until that point. So, hey, maybe replay it. Maybe it makes more sense. But I think as a puzzle game, totally fun for a little while if this is what you're looking for. If you're looking for some brain teasers.
I really did hate the green paint, though.
Oh, yeah, I wanted to talk about the green paint. As far as the telegraphing of game mechanics goes, that green paint totally had no idea what it was supposed to do for the longest time. Yeah, it's a weird one.
So that's the one that resets your doors, right? So you can reuse
it's
the same connection.
Yeah, it holds your space, basically, while you can reset things around you.
Yeah, so if you change something on one panel and then you connect it to a green paint, it will then save everything that you've done in that panel, but everything else will reset. So there are some puzzles that you have to, select which one you're going to save and then do it again for a different one, and then, But I don't think the game telegraphs that very well. This is where it starts to because when there's a wire connection to the thing, you generally know what you have to do. There's some sense to that. If I connect a wire on the sign to another wire connection, current will go through it. But the internal logic is where it starts to fall apart.
Yeah.
Why does green paint?
Yeah, I mean, this game trades so much on everything being kind of real-world adjacent and functioning in an intelligible way. That's the mechanic that feels the most contrived. They came up with a mechanic, but all the other ones up until then, doors connect side to side, and you need to be adjacent to each other so that the doors can connect. Same thing with the ladders, the points where you're controlling switches that control between signs, that makes some sense. There are holes in some of the signs where you can fall from one sign into a sign behind it. All of those have a kind of tactile feel to them that makes sense intuitively. That mechanic with the green paint is the only one I think it's the only one really that it's a gameplay mechanic first and foremost.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting oversight for a game like this, too, because, the game's all about signs. So it raises an interesting question, and I think about this a lot when I play games, honestly, is how we sort of, recognize things.
Yep.
And it's mostly from, shared history, right? If we just think about street signs, there's no real reason that, an octagon has to signal stop, except that an octagon always has signaled stop. And the game sort of understands that, right? When you're drawing these paths, if the paths work, they're solid. If for some reason they don't, they're dotted, or when you link up doors, it creates a full circle as opposed to these little half moons that they start. So there's an intuitive sort of connection, okay, these are historical signs and symbols that we've all agreed upon, and we're just going to run with them for the rest of eternity, I guess. Whereas there's no we all understand green paint signals saving your progress while other things reset around you. Like, you need to draw on a shared history that doesn't necessarily have, in the same way street signs draw on that shared history for things like chevrons or, yield signs, whatever it is.
This game benefits very strongly from piggybacking on common knowledge, and the times where it diverges from that are, I think, the points where it's weakest, for sure. So with that, I think we've covered the Pedestrian. Any final thoughts? Any closing thoughts?
I mean, it's a good little puzzler, especially for the first, 2/3, 3/4. If you don't buy in by then, you're not going to enjoy the rest of it. But, if you like it to that point, you'll probably like the game.
Yeah, if you just want a simple, brain teaser thing, it's pretty good. There's a demo, which you can get on itch, I believe, for free, which only has the first level, but that still gets a little bit of the, technical elements to it.
You get the vibe.
Yeah, you understand what you're getting. If you are interested in speedrunning, I watched someone speedrun this game with the developer's commentary over it, and you can do it in 11, almost 12 minutes.
Wow.
Because the train section, if you know which code to put in, you could just jump right past literally everything to get right to the end.
That seems like an oversight.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about this before we started recording. It seems like they should have taken that out, but, it's,
It feels to me like the sort of thing you leave in because it's really convenient for debugging.
Yeah. And then you
testing the
remove
game.
it once you are done with that.
But yeah,
I guess then again, who's if you're a speedrunner, that's one thing, but who's buying a game explicitly so they can skip 2/3 of it?
Yeah, exactly.
podcast hosts.
Yeah, us.
But we did play all this game. That was a funny joke.
If you can get under 10 minutes, that's the record. So see what you can do.
Yeah. All right, so with that, Em, it is now your turn to pick what game we play next once again. Yeah.
The game that we are going to play next. I have my list here. Due to scheduling, I have a limited number of things I can choose from.
So if it's a shorter game, I can play it on PC or something.
I'm just going to go with the one that I wanted to stream. We're going to do the Game Boy Advance game, Metroid Fusion.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
This one was a big influence in my childhood. One of the first Game Boy games, or I guess any game I ever played. It is pretty sick.
Game's so nice I own it twice.
Oh, yeah?
I don't know how I got 2 copies of it, but I have 2 copies of it.
It's good you have the copies, because I was worried this was going to be another
Hotel Dusk situation.
Hotel Dusk. Yeah.
No. I have played this game a good number of times. Metroid Fusion's dope.
Yeah.
And it's timely because there's going to be a new Metroid.
Yeah, that's why I was thinking about it. The new Metroid's got a fucked up robot.
Yeah.
This one's got a fucked up enemy, too. We're going to play
does.
Let's do it.
All right. So next time up, we'll be playing Metroid Fusion, sequel to... Is it the sequel to Super Metroid? I think.
I don't know which one
Maybe.
it directly ties to. I know there were some first-person shooter Metroids between them.
Prime, I believe, is a prequel to some of the other Metroids in the timeline. Write in. Tell us the Metroid timeline. If you want to do so, you can do so at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have our comment sections, and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. Please tell us what order the Metroids happen in. Don't tell us what order the Zeldas happen in, especially if there are multiple timelines. And if you want to support the show, you can do so on patreon.com/deeplistens. So with that, thank you for listening. Thank you, Pete.
Yeah, good little puzzler. We haven't gotten a puzzler in a while. I think it's another good pick.
Yeah, thank you, Em.
Thank you. We're going to play as another little guy with Samus next time.
Yeah, and we'll go faster, and the faster we go, the less clothes she has at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that.
Finally, I have an incentive to play a game.
And thank you, listeners. Till next time, peace.